Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. I want to follow the science. I really do. I want to so badly, but science is making it so hard lately. Or I actually should say ideologically driven scientists that have agendas, they're making it really hard to follow the science. And it's sad because it used to be so easy to follow the science. Remember the good old days, like last year? Science used to understand that there were things like immutable laws, like gravity and elemental charts, and those were accurate reflections of the real universe around us. Scientists could see that, and they affirmed that there was a natural order to the universe and mathematical patterns that just made logical sense. And scientists used to just follow the data wherever it led. Remember that? And sometimes the data leads you to uncomfortable conclusions, like the Earth is round when you used to think it was flat, or that maybe the sun doesn't revolve around the Earth and the Earth revolves around the sun instead. These ideas shattered the conventional views of time, and that's what science, when practiced correctly in the pursuit of truth, that's what science does. It probes, it challenges, and it illuminates, which moves the whole world forward because progress depends on science, negotiating, and dealing with reality, not being used in pursuit of imagining a world we wish existed, instead of dealing with the world as it actually exists. And this is why people are no longer following the science, because scientists are not following the science. Case in point. So you remember last week we talked about the breakdown, or the breakout amongst vaccinated people in Provincetown, Massachusetts. Remember, 800 people had tested positive for the Delta variant, 74% had been vaccinated, and it was a bombshell. Such a bombshell, in fact, that it caused the CDC to revise its guidance on masks, namely that we needed to put them back on because the Delta was supposedly spreading super fast and it was spreading amongst the vaccinated. So run and put your masks back on, everyone, the CDC said. And as it turns out, there was a little tiny bitty detail omitted from this super scientific data that might have actually helped contextualize the situation in P-Town. As it turns out, it was Bear Week in P-Town. What is Bear Week, you ask? Well, let the guy who spilled the beans on this omitted fact by the CDC and the media tell us what Bear Week is in his own words. His name is Peter Staley, and according to his bio on Twitter, he's a gay rights activist, and here's what he had to say about the whole P-Town outbreak during Bear Week. You'll want to remove the kids. We are not PBS. I'm not Big Bird. I'm not here to babysit. Here we go. Quote, if the CDC has increased their Delta RO because of the P-Town cohort, then they are overstating it for the general population. The cohort was 85% male, which both, by the way, Washington Post and New York Times have failed to mention this. Hello, it was Bear Week, and he says that the journalist rightly mentioned packed bars, etc., but everyone is missing the horny bear in the room. Bears go to P-Town to have, well, you know, gay men relations. Let's just put it like that. So even during, and the addendum they write, even during its gayest week, P-Town is not 85% male tourists. The cohort skews 85% male for a reason. CDC is being too politically correct and not explaining this, end quote. Yeah, he's absolutely right. And nobody stopped to go, why is it mostly like predominantly male? No one asked that? Like at no point, no one just like said, can we stop the merry-go-round for just 1 second? And I mean, good on Peter Staley, by the way, who felt compelled to reveal the actual truth about Bear Week in P-Town, which now if the CDC and the media were interested in the truth about the Delta variant, well, wouldn't it be highly relevant that this breakout they're basing policy on happened during, you know, Bear Week in P-Town? I'm not trying to be obscene, but if you wanted to spread the Delta, it seems to me like, you know, having romantical times with people and, you know, you're being out and about, that'd be a one-way ticket on the Delta virus airlines, destination COVID-19. But I'm not a scientist, right? I just follow the science. Common sense tells you that a packed weekend at a gay festival called Bear Weekend might lead to a breakout. And Peter Stanley seems to think so, and others do too. So if we can get that, and you get that, why can't scientists understand the simple fact? And if you were Dr. Fauci and the CDC and you knew that this was the setting point for the breakout, wouldn't that impact maybe perhaps your Rona policy guidance? I mean, and by the way, the survey for the CDC that they did that, the dates completely overlap with the dates from Bear Week in P-Town. So don't think that it was because it was Independence Day celebrations. Now, maybe the problem isn't people not wearing masks, but I don't know, maybe like kissing can help transmit the Wuhan coronavirus, right? Yet the Follow the Science CDC and the media, they don't mention the Bear Week as a factor in the Delta breakdown in P-Town. So here's Fauci claiming that the real problem actually is the viral loads in the nasal pharynxes of vaccinated people who get a breakthrough infection of the Delta. Listen.
When you look at the level of virus in the nasopharynx of a person who's vaccinated and gets a breakthrough infection, it was considerably less than the level of virus in the nasopharynx of an unvaccinated person. The data were clear. Now that we have a Delta variant, that has changed the entire landscape. Because when you look at the level of virus in the nasopharynx of a vaccinated person who gets a breakthrough infection with Delta, it is exactly the same as the level of virus in an unvaccinated person who's infected. That's the problem. So those data are very compelling, and that triggered the change in the CDC guideline.
So nothing about the fact that it was almost completely dudes getting the Delta virus, dudes who were attending Bear Week in P-Town. Yet all of America has to put its mask on because of Bear Week in P-Town, because of this one unique Delta breakout, a breakout that's being misrepresented by omitting the circumstances in which it occurred. And it's just another example of how when they say follow the science, the CDC actually means follow whatever we say is the science. We all know that the CDC stopped doing science apparently a long time ago, and they just keep discrediting themselves. This has been a disaster. And it's not that people don't want to follow the science or that they just want to, I don't know, they stick it to the CDC. People really do want to follow the science. They desperately want to follow the science, so stop hiding it. And like I said, I really wish I could. The problem is the so-called scientists at the CDC who clearly have some kind of agenda that just prevents them from bringing forward the whole truth again and again and again, which is why people are tuning out the CDC and doing their own research, because there is such a loss of trust at this point. And no wonder people are losing trust in science, or, I mean, our scientists, rather. They seem to be losing their ever-loving minds. Here's an article that popped up over the weekend. This is from WebMD, right? Remember, follow the science. Everybody's following the science. The WebMD used to be kind of maybe a once trusted source of science-based medical information whose credibility was destroyed with this one tweet. And it says, and we present it to you, quote, "Sex should be removed as a legal designation on the public part of birth certificates. The American Medical Association, AMA, they said Monday," end quote. So there it is. WebMD has unlearned what we've known since, I don't know, the beginning of time and before we discovered fire, that there are two sexes and they're assigned to you by nature. You don't get a say in the matter. I mean, it's called chromosomes, okay? Now, you can choose to identify however you want, but the science remains the same. The biological reality underpinning sexuality remains the same. And speaking of science, did WebMD follow the science, or did they follow an ideology? Well, it's obvious, because no empirical data has been discovered, no new genetic reality revealed. All that's happened is that our sciences have become hostage to an unhinged revolution, sexual revolution, Marxist revolution, all the revolutions that really want to overturn the binary reality of sex and gender. Now, all of this is to say, how in the world can we be expected to follow the science on the coronavirus when scientists no longer can actually identify or know what a boy is or a girl is, or at the very least are afraid to affirm biological realities? And also, have you noticed how all of the people that tell you to follow the science about the pandemic don't actually follow the science about the pandemic themselves, but they expect you to? So check it. Barack Obama is having a 60th birthday bash on Martha's Vineyard, right? Big, super celebrity, rich area. It's going to be a celeb fest, surely maskless, and during the very dangerous Delta outbreak, which we are told infects and is spread also by the vaccinated. So maybe the former president should call off his birthday bash. Maybe do it over Zoom, like people have had with their funerals, or children have been doing with school for the past, year and a half in some places? You know, maybe set an example by following the science. But no, see, following the science is for unwashed, flyover, dirty people, not our elites. Barack and Michelle Obama expecting nearly 500 people to show up, including old-timers like Steven Spielberg. And guess who the musical act is going to be? Pearl Jam. I did not have Pearl Jam playing a bougie Martha's Vineyard birthday party on my bingo card, but you know what? It's 2021. Hopefully, when it's over, most of them can actually still sing that I'm still alive. In any case, it turns out that when you're worth 60 million, not only do the rules not apply to you, but even better, life continues completely as it always was. What pandemic? What Delta virus? What is any of this? The Obamas and all rich people are living the good, ignoring the science while you're supposed to follow it live, masking your kids, yourself, socially distancing, while you have, these folks that want to influence you to get the jab and follow the science, but they'll jump on a private jet and head to Martha's Vineyard for a party with 500 of their closest friends without masks while they encouraged you to have a lonely Thanksgiving. Here's another example. How about follow the science Democrat mayor, Lori Lightfoot? Yes, despite the very, very dangerous, highly transmissible, and oh so deadly Delta variant, the show must go on at Lollapalooza in Chicago with 110,000 some odd people, thousands and thousands of people, singing, mixing together, mostly maskless, because everybody is following the science. It's not contagious in Chicago or Martha's Vineyard, apparently. See, they're following whatever Lori Lightfoot says is the science. And if you haven't figured it out yet, no one is following the science, especially the people who tell you to follow the science. It's just a trope used to silence dissension, quell any questions, stop the stupidity of the CDC's guidance from being revealed. See, we stopped following the science because we actually believe in science. And also we understand that we've put people in charge of our health agencies who seem to care more about an agenda and protecting ideology than they actually do following real science in order to protect your health. So at this point, follow the science seems like a phrase to hide behind, and one that allows bureaucrats to tell you what to do, like telling you where to go and whether or not you have to cover your face. It's a way to make sure that the world that we entered in March of 2020 continues. It's that new normal they keep telling us about. And that's because maybe they never intend on life returning to normal as it was. And you have to go along with all of this. And why? They're just asking you to follow the science. So where's the data and the science? Yeah, just stop asking questions and just follow the science. Yeah, what we say. Watch Peter Doocy, by the way, of Fox News, ask for science and watch the response.
Why is it that the federal government is asking vaccinated Americans to wear masks to stop the spread of COVID-19, but at the same time, federal agents are also releasing COVID-19 positive border crossers into small towns in Texas?
I just want to be very clear here. I do want to answer your question, Peter. First, just to step back and do this 30,000-foot view, there's been no change in Title 42. Families and single adults are expelled, if possible, and apprehended at the southern border. The majority of apprehensions that we saw at the border in June were expelled. Those who can't be expelled or are awaiting processing are often placed in alternatives to detention programs while their cases are being reviewed. CBP provides migrant with PPE from the moment they are taken into custody, and migrants are required to keep masks on at all times, including when they are transferred or in the process of being released. If anyone exhibits signs of illness in CBP custody, they are referred to local health systems for appropriate testing, diagnosis, isolation, and treatment. CBP takes its responsibility to prevent the spread of communicable diseases very, very seriously. We value our partners in local communities whose work is critical to moving individuals safely out of custody and through the appropriate immigration pathway, and assist in mitigating COVID-19 and isolating quarantine when needed.
She seems nicer than Jen Psaki, doesn't she? And also kind of gets railroaded in some of these questions. That's why they brought Psaki back out. Okay, so you have it there. We're not going to show you the science, just follow the science. By the way, how are you going to make sure people are going to be wearing masks at the border? Everyone's given a mask. People were also told not to enter illegally, but yet they did it anyway. How are you going to make sure that people are wearing masks? I don't know. Why are we supposed to trust the CDC on this? I mean, apparently they're highly respected. That's what we're told. But I wonder if the Biden administration would like to take a poll and ask the American people how much credibility the CDC still has with the American public. But such is the new world, where follow the science just means do what we tell you, put the mask on, get jabbed, regardless of whatever your health profile is. We don't care if you have natural immunity. Don't ask tough questions. Do what you're told. Because it would be a shame if we have to follow the science and then reinstate the lockdowns. And maybe this is why increasingly censorship and mandates are replacing discussion about facts and data. Because increasingly science doesn't seem to be the point at all in this pandemic. It hasn't been the point for a long time. And I think a lot of people see that and understand it. They see that the administration is struggling to keep up with the changing CDC narratives. They're all over the place. And they're just punting now when asked a question and say, no, just trust the experts. Okay, we don't. That's why we're asking you. And so it's a little hard to navigate this pandemic. People are growing justifiably ever more distrustful, not just of the government, but of each other, because the government now is trying to divide everybody between the vaccinated and unvaccinated because they've had horrible messaging with all of this. It's not our fault, it's theirs. All of this could have been avoided by following the science. And even if it leads to some very uncomfortable truths, like, I don't know, Bear Weekend, contributing to the breakdown, the breakout in P-Town, and the vaccines. Well, it turns out we didn't know as much about all of this as we thought, which is understandable, but heaven forbid the government just admit it because we want everyone vaccinated, no matter the science. But now the real science is, well, seems to be coming out a little bit, and a lot of people, many are following it. Some are not. And unfortunately, though, the CDC and the Biden administration, they're following the CDC's scientists, not actual science. And that can be a problem, and not just for negotiating this pandemic, but for guiding America through any future crisis that might come. This is why science is important. So up next, Congressman Glenn Grothman of Wisconsin joins us next to talk about how science apparently, well, at the border, do you realize that the Delta variant apparently isn't contagious there at all? Keep it here. You haven't seen a lot of Vice President Kamala Harris lately, have you? I think it's because, well, at least what's being reported, her polling is really, really, really bad, and particularly as it relates to the border issue. This is a disaster, and people infected, reportedly, with the coronavirus, or the Delta variant, same thing, are flowing over it. I just saw actually a photo, maybe an hour ago, of about 1,000 people standing under an overpass right in McAllen, Texas, right where one of my radio affiliates, KURV, is located. Congressman Glenn Grothman of Wisconsin got back from his 4th trip to the border this year, and he joins us now to explain why apparently the border is a contagiousness-free area. Congressman, thanks for being here. Good to see you. So we're told to follow the science, so explain to us what you've seen about how apparently the border is just, you don't get the virus down there, it's contagion-free.
Oh, it's just getting worse every way you look at it. I just talked to someone in the Rio Grande sector. They said another all-time high in apprehensions last week. You are right. They will only test people if they already have a temperature. Otherwise, they're sending them in to non-governmental organizations, particularly Catholic charities. They are putting people up in hotels. People are leaving the hotels. So we have people, not just people who are not vaccinated, people with the COVID coming across their southern border, which in addition is a problem in addition to the fact just the sheer numbers crossing the border. We still don't have the total numbers across the border in June, which by itself is a little bit of a scandal, because normally we'd have those numbers by now. But we know over 70,000 new people entered the United States in May, record numbers, just such a problem as America is changing before our eyes. And I really sometimes think when Joe Biden brings up other things, it's so we take our eyes off the border, which is the biggest problem we face.
I think that's a really good point, Congressman. It is a huge problem. And I just last week I was hearing numbers of border agents which we already have too few on the ground near the border anyway. And I've been down to the RGV Valley, I've been down to that sector, and it's a huge area. And I was really astounded to see just how few Border Patrol agents there were on the ground to patrol it. But Congressman, now they're also becoming infected and then having to quarantine, which leaves us with even fewer agents.
Oh, absolutely. Between the agents who have the COVID themselves and agents who have to process the little children. This time a year ago, about 6,000 people were entering every month. Now it's over 70,000 every month, and that was 2 months ago. It's probably greater today. And so much of that is because the Border Patrol cannot guard the border. And shockingly, if you look at this budget that's right now working its way through Congress, again and again, there are lines 35%, 50% increase in items, but Homeland Security gets no increase. It's like Joe Biden spends money like a drunken sailor on everything except for the Border Patrol. And now that the Border Patrol is having to babysit the new children are coming here, more than ever, we desperately need more people at that border.
Yeah, Congressman, I was today on air, I was going over everything that was in the infrastructure spending bill and how we're apparently paying, I don't know, I remember how many millions for removal of invasive plant species and apparently Amtrak from U.S. to Canada. But the border is infrastructure, and I've only read through, a portion of the Frillion pages that the lobbyists wrote, but I didn't see anything in there so far for the border, Congressman.
No, and it's horrible. Anybody who's down there sees all the parts of the wall that intended to go up. They're being stolen at night, or we have to spend money guarding them. So the
people are stealing parts of the wall? I don't mean to interrupt you, but people are stealing parts of the wall?
For the metal. Not the wall that's been built, all the parts of the metal that was supposed to be going up.
But still.
And they take them at night. Why wouldn't they? So it's just kind of amazing the chaos they have down there. But that's how little respect they have for the wall. Not only are they not building it, but the pieces that are sitting there, stacked up along the border are disappearing.
Yeah, Congressman, talk to me about how, because we hear all these numbers that are coming in of infected people coming in from the border. If I or you were, you're in Congress, so you might have a little bit more of a network than I do. But if I were to leave the country and come back into the country, I would have to prove that I am coronavirus negative to get in. But apparently at the southern border, you do not.
Absolutely. You're in much better shape coming here illegally than if you come here legally. And not only that, of course, when you come back, you've got to show identification. People are coming here without any identification, which first of all is ridiculous in its own right. It puts the illegals in a preferable place compared to the average American. But even more when you come here with identification, without identification, we can't check your criminal background record. Now, right now, the number of people coming across with a criminal record who are caught is way higher than it was this time last year. But that doesn't include people who we have no way of checking. And if they show up without an ID, you know what we do? We let them in anyway. We buy them a plane ticket wherever they want. And I saw it because I was at the McAllen part of the border. On my flight out, I bet there were 15 to 20 illegal immigrants on that flight, which is not unusual at all. Just give them a name. It doesn't make any difference if you have a criminal background record, murder, rapist. We don't care. Just don't give us a name. And we'll give you an airline ticket to wherever you want to go, Chicago, Denver, New York, wherever you want. Off they go, which explains why when I watched the illegal immigrants march from the Rio Grande River to the Border Patrol station, everybody had a smile on their face. When they saw a Border Patrol agent, no fear in their eyes because they know what's going to happen. We're going to give you a free ticket wherever you want in the country.
Yeah, at taxpayer expense, apparently also, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. So taxpayer expense, and then of course sorry, go ahead, Congressman.
The most organization we have at the border, sadly, because we have a shortage of border patrol agents, is the Mexican drug cartels. Whether you're sneaking across the middle of nowhere in the Arizona desert, or whether you are coming across the Rio Grande River on a boat, you are paying the Mexican drug cartels for letting you across. Indeed, on the boats, people have a little
wristbands,
tag around a wristband. You've got a wristband like you used to get into the county fair, and that wristband designates which gang is getting you there. It indicates what the good or the bad tour you're getting as you work your way up from Central America. Good boat, small boat, train, airplane. How are you getting from southern Mexico across the border? Depending upon where you're coming from, $3,000 to $20,000 to get across. And by the way, I see right now you're showing a boat. You know what would happen on that boat if the Border Patrol approached that boat? If they had a 3-year-old child on that boat, they'd throw the child overboard. And you know why they do that? They know we're a compassionate country. And our Border Patrol will save that 3-year-old from dying rather than go after the smuggler on the boat. So whether they're sneaking across people or they're sneaking across drugs, which is a whole other problem, they think nothing of throwing a little child in the Rio Grande.
One of the things that you said earlier, Congressman, especially about the wristbands, it almost sounds as though the Mexican drug cartels have a better system of organization there than the Biden administration does for dealing with the border.
That's not saying much, but they are very organized. And that's how people are coming in our country.
Yeah.
And once they come here, you might say, how can you pay $10,000? Well, there may be an agreement saying once you come to America, you're supposed to get a job and X amount of that money has to go back to the cartels. And if you don't pay that money, they may be looking at your relatives in Honduras, your relatives in Guatemala, and they may pay the price if you don't give the money back. So this whole change we've had over the last 7 months, is anybody been a big beneficiary? The Mexican drug cartels. I don't believe it, but I've been told by Border Patrol agents, they believe right now they're making more money smuggling people here than on the drugs.
Oh, completely. We're talking to Congressman Glenn Grothman. Congressman, this, I read another piece today. There's another hotel that apparently people who are crossing the border that they are being sent to. There were a couple of local news stories last week that discussed how police were even called at one point because one group had told someone at, I guess, the hotel restaurant that they actually had tested positive for coronavirus. And so no one is being told in the communities when these people are released or when they are bused and put into these different hotels. The communities aren't told. I mean, Democrat mayors have been very, very upset. Law enforcement has been very upset. Local hospitals upset also. But we were told that if we wanted to have Thanksgiving dinner with our family, that it was a super spreader event. Any kind of Trump rally was a super spreader event. Would this not be the ultimate super spreader event and then pushing it out to, how come no one's asking questions about this? It makes me think that all of the concern for the virus is a joke.
Well, it's a very good question. I mean, on the one hand, the Biden administration talks about going door to door. And on the other hand, there are people who we know have the virus. Not only are not vaccinated, they have the virus, and they are put in hotels, which are, there's no guards on these things. So, of course, since the goal was to come to the United States, people are leaving, traveling around Texas or around the rest of the country. Absolutely.
Wow, this whole thing is just an absolute nightmare. Do you foresee it getting fixed anytime soon? Is there going to be enough public outrage to maybe force the administration to act?
Well, that's why we're on the show today. I wish the mainstream media would pick up on it. I'm afraid some people, because we've been talking about the border for years now, their eyes glaze over and say, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about baseball or something. We are losing America at the southern border right now. Every news media outlet ought to be doing nothing but talking about the border until some action is taken. And you're right, we haven't seen anything about where's Kamala Harris. I mean, this is supposedly the thing she's supposed to be dealing with. We haven't heard anything about it at all. And right now, at least 70,000 people a month are coming across. I think if the Biden administration ever introduces the new numbers for June, that's going to go up to 80,000, and it will continue to rise. And this is really unusual because this is the hottest time of the year down there. Usually people don't travel down there when it's this hot, but instead of having the numbers fall, the numbers keep going up.
This is just awful to see. Well, we'll keep watching it and see what develops, see if the administration finally acts. Good heavens. Glenn Grothman, thank you so much, Congressman. Good to see you.
Thank you for alerting the American people.
Of course. All right, folks, coming up, Eric Felten of Real Clear Investigations discusses how critical race theory, did it really usurp the civil rights movement? I mean, it's a genuine question to ask. We'll discuss it. Stay with us. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company serving premium coffee to people who love America. Veteran CEO and founder Evan Hafer spent over 7 years on the ground overseas with U.S. Special Forces and as a CIA contractor. Black Rifle Coffee is committed to Evan's mission of supporting veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. So this summer, Black Rifle Coffee Company invites you to enjoy your coffee. Whether you're brewing the perfect cup of pour-over or cracking open a can of 300 on your next backcountry mission, Black Rifle Coffee is here to fuel your way wherever summer takes you. So head on over to blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV to order yours and use code DanaTV at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Fuel your summer with America's coffee. Black Rifle Coffee. Pursuing equal opportunity, aspiring to be colorblind. I mean, these used to be the core tenets of the original civil rights movement. But critical race theory seems to have destroyed that with this goal of tearing down the republic and rebuilding it and with some re-racialization. So how did all of this happen? Eric Felten of Real Clear Investigations is here to discuss. Eric, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Dana, thanks for having me on.
Of course. I can't help but think, as I compare what it at least seemed to be the core principles of critical race theory and that of the civil rights movement, the civil rights movement obviously must still be around, but it does seem that CRT has kind of usurped it, at least with commanding attention and at least with I guess progress right now in all of these institutions. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it was really the long-term goal of critical race theory, which got going in the mid-1980s. They had been part of a radical university project called Critical Legal Studies. But then the crits, as they called themselves, the Critical Legal Studies Group, the crits of color, as they called themselves, broke off in 1986 and went on this mission that is sort of broken through in the last few years of critical race theory, the idea being that to sort of cast aside the ideals of yesteryear, the ideals of integration, of assimilation, of color blindness, and to cast those aside and in their place put color consciousness and separation of races.
So, Eric, one of the things that I found incredibly interesting in the piece that you wrote for Real Clear Investigations was this change at Manor College in Massachusetts, where it seemed that you had these activists, and they were at this forum that was hosted by white liberals, or white progressives, rather. And at one point, I guess the white liberals, you said, were viewing themselves as allies in this whole thing. And then when they realized throughout this discussion that it was them who were not properly race conscious, that's when kind of the tables turned a little bit, because you have who people, I guess, that they thought of themselves as allies, maybe really they weren't. Talk to us a little bit about this.
Well, it's really fascinating. There's a book by Kimberly Crenshaw, who's one of the leaders and inventors of critical race theory. And she talks about this critical legal studies conference in 1986 that happened at Pine Manor College in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And the crits would have these sort of annual conferences, and they invited a number of the crits of color to put on some workshops at the 1986 conference, talking about race issues. And what ended up happening was the scholars of color who were there at the workshop really started out their presentation by demanding of the critical legal studies people, why is it that yours is such a white institution and has done nothing for progress among racial issues? And Kimberly Crenshaw takes pride, and it was almost gleeful in the book, writing about how the people who had thought they were the allies of the crits of color, the crits, found themselves sort of ambushed and full of hand-wringing hysteria, as Kimberly Crenshaw put it. And so they really had a kind of falling out at that point, and the crits went their way, and the race crits went their way, and their way was working up critical race theory and pursuing it really as a long-term agenda. We often wonder, where do these things come from? Well, the scholars have been working on critical race theory, the agenda, since the 1980s. And from the beginning, it was seen, as Cornel West called it, as a powerful political movement. And these things are really often ideological movements that are taken up in the university, where, as Kimberly Crenshaw says, they saw the university as a really potent place for indoctrination. And then you work your way back from the university.
Eric, one of the things that you noted in your piece, too, is that as CRT started working its way throughout these academic institutions across the country, was that there was a real focus on law schools and legal departments and really the framework of laws that has constituted our republic, a neutral, something that's kind of, a neutral that it seems that every side should be able to acknowledge without any kind of partisanship. But yet, what CRT and what people like Kimberly Crenshaw were advocating is that you really can't have this framework of laws because the whole system is corrupt. The laws thus regulating all of this are corrupt, so everything has to kind of be thrown out. Was there a real effort to target, was that really kind of the tip of the spears, going after law schools and going after these legal departments at universities and starting there?
Right. If you think about the civil rights movement, you had protests in the streets, you had marches, but you also had a series of legal cases that were brought, and civil rights were affirmed and brought to the forefront in a lot of legal cases that were seen as the real sort of triumph of the civil rights movement. When the critical race theory crew came along, they wanted to reject the civil rights movement and reject its achievements. And that meant having to also go after the courts and say that the achievements of the civil rights movement in the courts was phony, was a sort of put-up job. And they wanted to reject not only the success that the civil rights movement had had in the courts, but also say that the sort of principle of the courts that it's about individuals with rights, and those rights are litigated and looked at, but it's still about individuals as opposed to social movements. And so the idea was to go after the courts to deny this notion that the courts were a place where individuals would go to have their rights affirmed.
Wow. And it really was, the civil rights movement seemed to almost be an enemy of critical race theorists, or the crits, as you said.
Yeah, the critical race theorists saw the civil rights movement as exhausted, was the term that they put it. And partly it was, I think, that you had such towering leaders as Dr. Martin Luther King, and you had this sort of follow-on movement that knew they weren't going to be able to compete with Dr. King, and so rejected his teaching and rejected his strategy. And then I think you also had this desire to basically discredit the courts and make the courts as no longer someplace you went to have the redress of your grievances, as a way of looking at the courts as just a white institution that wouldn't do anything for African Americans.
Yeah, and therein lies the difference, because they viewed the civil rights movement as essentially just perpetuating an institution that critical race theorists thought was, you're perpetuating the very thing that's oppressing them, essentially, is what they were arguing. That's just, that seems so bizarre to us now, but I can't imagine this argument being made and mainstreamed the way it is now, like 20 years ago. I mean, it would have been sacrilegious to the civil rights movement.
Right, and but part of what was going on was Kimberly Crenshaw and a number of the other race crits were very upset about the Bakke decision that put limitations on affirmative action. And so part of this movement came about in an effort to stop the courts from limiting affirmative action. And so rejecting the notion that there could be anything that somebody might call reverse racism, and to say there's only one kind of racism, and that's the institutional kind.
It's amazing to see how widespread it has become, and it's also interesting to see people who I think we all viewed as being part of the civil rights movement. Now some individuals, even people like Al Sharpton, which I know he's maybe more on the charlatan kind of flashier side of things, but still, even people whose names are very well known like his, kind of adopt, at least optically, the principles and the language, and stand, in solidarity with a lot of people that have been promoting CRT, especially considering, that antagonistic relationship between the two. I mean, what do you think that represents, at least where it concerns that kind of I guess, progression or liberal equality or et cetera. I mean, does that mean that, is the civil rights movement now passé, or is it CRT or nothing?
I think the important thing to realize is that CRT does not have the interests of the civil rights movement at heart. It's in opposition. It's out to push the civil rights movement aside, if not destroy it. And if you look, a lot of people are sort of baffled at why an organization dealing with racism would behave in ways that cause such strife between races. But if you see it as being a way of attacking the civil rights movement, of attacking the cooperation of whites and blacks together, trying to make the society a better place, and how do you arrest that? You get people angry at each other. It's not meant to be something that solves problems. CRT is something
that's
meant to
reconciliation. It's not meant to be reconciliation.
Exactly. And so you see throughout the literature on critical race theory going back to the 80s, a rejection of integration, a rejection of assimilation, the idea that integration is a kind of genocide. And so CRT very much wants to keep the black community and black culture separate and distinct from white community and white culture. And it seems to me just such a shame that what is being pitched as the true way of approaching race is one that tears people apart, that tears communities apart, that discourages friendship and assimilation and integration and all of those sort of goals that animated and made powerful the civil rights movement.
No, I agree. It's incredibly sad to see. It's sad to see how those historical achievements be kind of deconstructed block by block. It's awful. Eric Felten, this is a great piece over at Real Clear Investigations. Thanks for the deep dive into the origination, really, of this. We appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thanks, Dana.
Mm-hmm. All right, folks. Well, you guys remember the Muppets, right? You guys remember Gonzo? Gonzo was always kind of, I don't know, he was always kind of alternative, right? Well, apparently now you're supposed to refer to him as Gonzarella because he likes to wear dresses, and we're now politicizing children's cartoons. Oh my. Keep it here. We'll tell you more. Well, shame on you if you're bothered at all that the Muppet babies, like particularly that baby, actually this baby over here, has announced that he's like to wear dresses. That's Gonzo. Gonzo was married to a hen, wasn't he? Like for a while, Camilla the chicken? I think so. So if you're bothered by Gonzo, it just shows that you're clearly living in the past. That was in 2020, by the way, when we still understood like actual biological sexuality to be composed of two genders and everything was determined by chromosomes. Remember? It used to be just women and men, dudes and chicks. You know, reality. But that's so 5 minutes ago. Catch up. So here's Gonzo, the Muppet baby, who apparently now your kids have to learn about sexuality from whatever the heck that animal is. That one over there. Watch.
There you are. You missed our royal ball.
We met the most amazing princess. But they ran away, and all they left behind was this.
Everyone, there's something I need to tell you. The princess who came to your ball tonight was me. I'm Gonzarella.
But Gonzo, why didn't Vu tell us?
Because you all expected me to look a certain way. I don't want you to be upset with me, but I don't want to do things just because that's the way they've always been done either. I want to be me.
Oh, Gonzo, we're sorry. It wasn't very nice of us to tell you what to wear to our ball.
You're our friend, and we love you any way you are.
Yeah, of course we do.
Yeah.
First off, as a child who grew up with the Muppet Babies, who in the world did the voice casting for this train wreck of a horribly computer-generated cartoon? It sounds like someone's dad doing the voices when they're reading a storybook to kids, right? Like, this is how Miss Piggy talks, and this is how the other one talks, and they all sound like this. Oh my gosh, this is horrible. Who did this writing? No one talks like this. I had weekly reader-free stories that sounded better and were written better with better character development than this garbage. This is vomit. This is cartoon vomit. It insults the original spirit of the Muppet Babies. And Gonzo can be different without having to wear a dress. Just by the way, look, it's just, if you are upset about this at all, I'm upset about it on an artistic level. And also, I think this is stupid. But if you're surprised to see that Gonzo likes to cross-dress as a princess, you just apparently don't understand modern sexuality at all. See, Gonzo may be a cartoon, fictional, whatever the heck he is, but he knows that biological sex has nothing to do with gender. That's right, because you're born with boy parts or girl parts, and that doesn't make you a boy or girl at all. Not anymore. That's because nowadays, should I talk like them? How you identify becomes reality. Oh my gosh, it was so stiff, right? The whole performance was awful. Say you're a boy, and then magically you are one, because like Gonzo, gender is just fictional role play. And that's apparently the whole newfangled gender pronoun thing is about. Do you remember when Kamala Harris announced her pronouns during the debates back in 2020? Because announcing your pronouns shows that just because you look like a girl and have girl parts, you might actually be a boy. And just to be sure, everyone should announce their gender pronouns, despite the fact that they're obvious for 99.9999% of people. So Gonzo, after long last, turns out to be a girl. I don't even know what it is. Do you even know what what on Gonzo could be considered a girl or boy? We don't even know what it is. But see, that's why you always ask someone what their preferred pronouns are. You wouldn't want to misgender an animated talking pig. Because how do we know that Ms. Piggy identifies as a girl? Well, Jim Henson should have known better than to assume what her pronouns were when he created her. Maybe, in fact, Miss Piggy is a they. And what about Kermit? Come to think about it, Kermit liked to sing a song about rainbows or something. Rainbow Connection, I don't remember, right? And apparently you can't, if you're a dude who likes rainbows, that totally must mean you identify as a girl. Just like if you are a girl and you're a tomboy, you totally must be a boy, right? I mean, I'm just saying, who knows? I just remember Kermit talked about rainbows, but he was also married to a pig. Do we even know that Miss Piggy's a girl? Does Miss Piggy know if Kermit's a boy? Does it matter? No, not at all. Because just like how cats don't have opposable thumbs, Greg Fokker, these animals are make-believe and they don't exist. So if you're confused, that's okay. This is all new and it's definitely not based in any kind of science or reality, so you can be forgiven. But if you're confused, imagine how confusing it is for a kid who can't even do math or tie their shoe. But apparently the creators of this Muppet Babies now the newfangled horrible CGI vomit, must feel like it's okay to introduce these highly bewildering sexual concepts to your children in crappy animation. And they don't really care if you object, obviously. Yes, Gonzo announcing that he's Gonzarella. Could you be any more unimaginative with a name? And likes to wear, sidebar, Gonzarella would be a really fun punk band name of like all girls. And he likes to wear princess dresses because apparently that's what the makers of the Muppets, or at least this horribly, horribly done cartoon, believe is appropriate for your child to watch. And they think your kid's gonna get that. I think your kid is gonna be like me and be like, what in the hell is Gonzo? What is this thing? Is it an animal? Is it an elephant anteater? Is it an anteater? Someone's gonna let me know. Or is it like the thing that's the anteater but not really the anteater? Because there's one of those animals out there too, apparently. I don't know. Does it matter? It's more important to know if he's a boy or girl or both or they. That's the new reality in this upside down world of 2021. So that does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.